Good evening. I am Major General George Gordon Meade. I'm a native of Philadelphia, West Point graduate, renowned engineer, particularly adept at building lighthouses on the New Jersey coast. Barnegat Light come to mind, and also on the southern coast of Florida. Mexican War veteran. Beginning of the Civil War, I was the superintendent of the survey of the Great Lakes. I was an Army engineer. But when the Civil War erupted, I made myself available for a combat command and eventually was promoted Brigadier General in command of Pennsylvania Volunteers, and then rose through the ranks due to competence and command, I suppose, and through brigade, through division to corps, until the eve of the Battle of Gettysburg. 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg erupted, I was ordered to take command of the Union Army against the insurgent army of General Lee, my former fellow engineer, whom I knew well, and we worked together. Now, I know I here speak about Army bands and Army music from the bands, and I must say that I've always been a great fan of classical music. Love to go to the opera, the theater, of course, but particularly enjoyed the Army bands that were so prevalent during the beginning of the Civil War. Practically every regiment that went to the front had its own band. Now, most of these bands had been private military bands and were mainly of German extraction. It turns out that the Germans have some kind of special adepts at musical instruments and learning musical instruments and playing it, and so they seem to be very, very prevalent among the bands that were featured in the various regiments. Now, the War Department ordered in July of 1862 that the regimental bands be disbanded, hence the name, band, disband. That's a joke. And because practically every regiment had a band, and there were 20, maybe sometimes 20, 25 members, and they were thousands and thousands of them, and it was taking up a lot of people who might be falling into the ranks. And of course, it also was very expensive to keep them supplied. And so they went to brigade bands. And that means a brigade is composed of 3 or 4 regiments. So instead of having 3 or 4 bands, now you were down to 1 band. And that band could have no more than 16 players and a principal musician. And so that was manageable. And now I remember very well that the Philadelphia Brigade, which is a brigade of 4 regiments raised and trained in Philadelphia, was positioned on the 3rd day of the Battle of Gettysburg directly in front of the angle at the copse of trees. And that was the spot to which General Lee had dictated that the Pickett's, so-called Pickett's charge, actually there were 3 divisions, Pickett's, Pettigrew, and Trumbull, that charged 13,000 men, the flower of the Confederacy. And I was there, of course, as commander of the Army. And I remember distinctly standing behind the Philadelphia Brigade, being very proud of my hometown and its loyal, gallant soldiers, and listening to their brigade band play inspiring music. And that's one of the things that the men loved about the Army brass bands. They would inspirit them. They would play along the march. The march seemed easier when music accompanied them. It inspired their patriotism. They would play all the great patriotic songs and the popular songs of the era, and it really gave the men something to look forward to, and the entertainment value in camp was very great. And so I was very inspired by the Philadelphia Brigade Band, your band, as they played midst shot and shell and bullet whiz. And as they played, the men seemed to respond to it and seemed to be more gallant and seemed to be more responsive. And so they were heroes, and I acknowledge that. Now, after the Battle of Gettysburg, of course, I remained in command of the Army of the Potomac for the rest of the war. A lot of people don't know that, but I was. And I loved band music so much that I wanted to have my own headquarters band. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't break that Philadelphia Brigade Band away from their troops. So what I did was I ordered another band, another popular band from Philadelphia, to become my headquarters band. And that was the band of the 114th Pennsylvania Volunteers, known as Collis Zouaves. They wore the colorful Zouave uniform, and they were always receiving new supplies of these uniforms from France. And so they did sustain that uniform through the course of the war. And they had a very excellent band. Their musical instruments had been captured by the Confederates after the Battle of Fredericksburg. Because they had been captured, they took the instruments away and they gave them to the band of the 26th North Carolina. They played at Gettysburg too, believe it or not, on the other side. And sometimes there were dueling bands, over the lines, and that really inspired some of the men as well. But they received new instruments from Europe at the largesse of some of the wealthy merchants of Philadelphia who supported that regiment. And they had one of the best Army bands, second only to the Philadelphia Brigade Band, Beck's band, which had been a band before the war started. And they were simply superb. And they would entertain guests and visiting dignitaries and so on and so forth during the course of the war. They remained my headquarters band. And my headquarters was the envy of the Army. So Army music, Army bands, the bandsmen themselves, and we all know that, of course, during battle, if they're not playing on order of the brigade commander or Army commander in my case, then they were serving as stretcher bearers and medics and wound treaters. And so they did heroic work going out in the open, under fire, and retrieving the wounded and treating them and bringing them to the field hospitals for treatment. So they did heroic work there as well. So they're indispensable. And if I have anything to say about it, these bands will continue, and I have nothing but praise for the Philadelphia Brigade Band. Thank you very, very much.